Federal agents detained and questioned Hasan Piker at O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, and I don't care if you love him, you detest him, you don't know who the hell this big-bodied, small-headed bastard who every picture it looks like he wants to make out with himself is. But the situation and this news, at the very least, it should make you somewhat concerned, because it's not just this outlier situation that's happening in a bubble. But for some of y'all that don't know, Hasan is one of the biggest political streamers out there. He's got millions of followers across Twitch, YouTube, X, you name it. And to list every controversy or notable thing, that would be its own video, but he is especially known for speaking out on behalf of Palestinians as well as against the actions of the US government. With what just happened, you have him claiming that his detention and interrogation were not random. Hasan going public and saying that he was questioned about his political views, including whether he supports Trump and whether he's connected to Hamas or affiliated groups in the region, and ultimately accusing the administration of trying to silence dissent with intimidation. Right, one of the things that we need to note here, because we're talking about someone trying to enter the country, we've seen a number of instances, is that Hasan was born in New Jersey and he's a US citizen. He had him saying here that he was coming back into the country on Sunday after traveling to France with his family to celebrate Mother's Day. And with coming back to the country, he had hopes, though not expectations, that everything was going to go smoothly since he was accepted into the government's global entry program, which normally speeds up security checks for pre-approved low-risk travelers returning to the States. But instead, he said what happened was that he was stopped for additional questioning and saying that it wasn't that bad, but that it was a very strange experience overall. With Hasan then later expanding on the experience in detail on his stream.
They knew who I was, and they were ready to receive me, let's just say. And it wasn't a very warm welcome. I get to the global entry line, and they're processing everybody expeditiously. You walk up, boom. You walk up, immediately they take your photo of your face, and you walk in. Gets to me. Take a photo, boom. Walk in. Instantly, the Customs and Border Patrol agent goes, "Step aside, sir."
Right, and from there, Hasan says that he was taken to a detention area to wait, and saying that the others that he saw there, it included terrified families and an old lady in a wheelchair, and that none of those that he spoke to were US citizens. And then eventually being called in for questioning. And with that, you had Hasan then describing the conversation as surprisingly cordial, but also claiming that the feeling was kind of undermined by the fact that the entire process is supposed to be intimidating. But you also had him saying that he wanted to see exactly how far CBP was going to go, and noting that he was in a position of privilege to be able to do so. And so with that, saying rather than pleading the fifth as maybe would normally be a good idea, he was very candid about some things, including his views on Donald Trump.
There were definitely areas where I was very revealing about my position, knowing full well that they know exactly what they're looking for. I saw no reason to hold back on certain things. So I said, I don't like Trump. I was like, what are you going to do? It's protected by the First Amendment. I don't like Trump.
With Hasan there saying that the interrogators seemed sympathetic, and he also noted that the agent identified himself as Iraqi, which Hasan said might have been part of it, and saying he might have lucked out in that regard. But that said, when he asked why he was being detained, the agent reportedly told Hasan that it was routine. Hasan then claiming that rather than questions about Trump, there were a lot about his views in connection to Israel.
They're asking me about Trump. They're asking me about like Hamas, and he kept saying stuff. He kept saying stuff like, do you like Hamas? Like, do you support Hamas? Do you think Hamas is a resistance group? I kept saying a couple different things. One, in terms of like Israel and all the wars, I was like, I'm on the side of civilians. I want the endless bloodshed to end. I am a pacifist. I want wars to end. I just kept repeating that over and over again. Every single time he asked me a question, I just kept repeating that. And every single time he asked me a question, a leading question about Hamas, I kept saying, the United States State Department recognizes Hamas as a terrorist organization. The United States State Department recognizes Hamas as a terrorist organization.
And from there, he had Hasan saying that the questions went from being about his views to asking if he had any contact or involvement with Hamas as well as the Houthis or Hezbollah.
Straight up. That's literally what this conversation was about. And it's not even a joke. Like, they straight up tried to get something out of me that I think they could use to basically detain me permanently, which is insane, because there is no direct connection or direct involvement.
But ultimately, with all that, while Hasan speculated they were looking for a reason to hold him, he said, what it was really all about was intimidation.
I think they did it because they know who the I am, and they wanted to put the fear of God into me. Obviously, the reason for why they're doing that is, I think, to try to create an environment of fear, to try to get people like myself, or at least like others that would be in my shoes that don't have that same level of security, to shut the f up. And for me, I'm going to use the privilege that I have in that moment to try and see what they're doing. Okay. Because every single thing that they ask me, trying to get me to say something like, oh, I support Hamas or whatever, is literally not allowed. Like, they are not. What do you mean? Like, why is this denying me entry into the country of my birth? Like, this is my birthright. I'm an American citizen. You can't just stop me at the border and be like, what's your opinion on Donald Trump? You're not allowed to enter the nation. The goal here is to put fear into people's hearts, to have a chilling effect on speech, that like the government is unafraid of intimidating you in illegal ways. Okay. The government is now officially willing and able to intimidate you for speech, for your speech. That is a direct violation of the First Amendment.
Now, with all of that said, on the other side, you had officials denying that Hasan was targeted over his beliefs during what they called a routine and lawful inspection, with notably DHS spokesperson Tricia McLaughlin accusing the streamer of, quote, lying for likes, and going on to say, claims that his political beliefs triggered the inspection are baseless. Our CBP officers are following the law, not agendas. And adding, upon entering the country, this individual was referred for further inspection, a routine lawful process that occurs daily and can apply for any traveler. Once his inspection was complete, he was promptly released. Though then, you had Hasan responding to the Trump administration's defense in a statement to NBC saying, what part of a lawful routine inspection requires DHS to question me about my political views, my opinions on Donald Trump, and my stance on Israel and Palestine? Which, are thoughts and questions we've seen echoed by others. I mean, you have people like Alex Peter, for example, known as Lolo, who's an attorney who's popular online, and he wrote, DHS flagging and detaining one of the US's largest left-wing voices for their political opinions, while the Trump admin suggests they might suspend habeas corpus, does not portend well for the future. But then also, Hasan's uncle, the co-founder of the Young Turks, where Hasan briefly worked, also chiming in, saying border agents detaining and interrogating Hasan proves two things. They are targeting US citizens as well. And adding, they asked him about his policy positions on Israel and Trump. This is a frontal attack on freedom of speech. This is when you show if you have principles or not. But ultimately, with all this, again, just to reiterate, I don't care if you love or you hate Hasan Piker, especially because it seems like this is not an outlier in a bubble situation. We started seeing claims and stories pop up from people that were from outside the country visiting the US, getting detained, questioned, deported. Right? We've talked about a number of those troubling situations, but also like with what happened with Hasan, it happened as we're seeing an increase in reports from people about US citizens being detained at the border and at airports. And we're also seeing it as just socially, we're seeing an escalation with situations popping up like big MAGA Republican accounts calling on Pam Bondi to arrest Aaron Parnas reporting news. There appears to be an escalation happening, and if you don't care about it because there's no like perfect victim for you, there's not gonna be. And unfortunately, as history has shown us time and time again, when this is allowed to happen, uncontested, eventually you and or the people that you love and you care about may find yourselves in the crosshairs. It's just a question of where it lands on the range of harassing to chill free speech to the incredibly scary, darker shit. But for now, that is the news, and then separately my opinion. And in the meantime, as we wait to see how everything plays out, I'd love to know your thoughts in those comments down below. And then I've got more news for you in just 60 seconds. But first, when was the last time you stepped in a puddle and you felt your soul leave your body? Because we've all been there, getting angry at ourselves or the puddle. But now, I just laugh victoriously because I just wear my Vessis everywhere. And I've worn them chasing my dogs through mud, walking through surprise rain, even through one of those mystery sidewalk puddles on a sunny day. And I'm dry every time because these shoes, they are 100% legit waterproof, not kind of splash proof waterproof, actually stay dry through a storm waterproof. And unlike most waterproof shoes, these don't look like you're hiking the Appalachian Trail. They are sleek, they are minimal, they actually look good with jeans, joggers, or whatever chaos I'm dressed in. Personally, I rock the Weekenders, and they've quietly replaced like 3 pairs of shoes in my closet. But main thing, errands covered, long airport days handled, standing for doors at an outdoor shoot or game, still comfy. Plus, they're feather light and breathable, so my feet aren't sweaty bricks by noon. One of the reasons I love having Vessi as a sponsor for the PDS is because I'd recommend them even if they didn't. So y'all say yes to spontaneous plans, walks in weird weather, and not checking the forecast. Just scan that QR code or go to vessi.com/DeFranco to get 15% off your first pair, automatically applied at checkout. It's VESSI.com/DeFranco, and go check them out and step into some weatherproof confidence. But then, Donald Trump loves his tax bills like my dad likes his women. Big and beautiful, and do not open that man's laptop without asking first. And while my dad may not want me to expand on that joke, what we can unpack are the Republicans unveiling the text of Trump's big, beautiful tax bill. Because, yesterday we talked about how Republicans released their plan to pay for Trump's legislative agenda by seemingly making cuts to Medicaid that will force millions of poor Americans to lose their health insurance and pay higher healthcare costs. But that it's just one element of a much broader package, which again, just so you understand, is literally named the One Big Beautiful Bill. All caps and all of which has been published in full. Now notably here, the proposal that House Republicans made public yesterday, it is nearly 400 pages long. So obviously, I'm not gonna be touching on everything. But I do need to hit on some of the key elements that Republicans are proposing here. Right, so first off, as expected, a huge part of this legislation is the more than $4 trillion in tax cuts, and specifically the extension of the 2017 tax cuts made under the first Trump administration. You know, while Americans from nearly all income levels will see the impacts, it's the wealthiest people and corporations that are gonna reap the biggest benefits. But according to the Center for American Progress, aka CAP, the bill would, quote, give millionaires a $68,000 tax cut and give households in the top 0.1% a $300,000 tax cut, while raising taxes or doing nothing for 33 million working class households. But then there are also several new policies aimed at helping more working class families. Right, things like giving newborn babies a $1,000 tax-free savings account called Money Account for Growth and Advancement, which if you didn't put that together, that is the MAGA account. With that, able to hold up to $5,000 in contributions until the beneficiary is 31 years old. And then another provision that would help middle class families is a $2,000 increase to the standard deduction, which is the baseline amount of income that filers can collect tax-free. So, you know, that bumps the total number to $32,000 per household. And the bill would also boost the child tax credit from $2,000 to $2,500 for 4 years, but only for some families. But then also, notably, according to Brookings, because of how the credit is designed based on family income, the lowest income children, they're left out entirely or given partial credits, while wealthier families are given full credits. And then notably, in addition to that, the Republican bill would add a new requirement that limits eligibility to only parents and guardians with social security numbers. Right, so essentially requiring people to be citizens in order to receive the benefit, which is a move that one think tank estimated would impact 4.5 million children who they themselves are citizens or legal residents. And then beyond that, the legislation would also include some significant new tax breaks, though very notably here, all of these are temporary, lasting only for the next 4 years. With those, for example, including a pause for taxes on tipped wages and overtime pay, with exceptions for highly compensated employees. And like the child tax credit, people would be required to have a social security number to qualify, functionally making non-citizens ineligible. Also, other new temporary tax breaks include a bonus deduction of $4,000 on Social Security wages for seniors with adjusted incomes no higher than $75,000 per individual. Also, one of the more contentious new temporary tax breaks would allocate up to $5 billion per year in tax credits for people who donate to school voucher programs that help families pay for private school tuition or homeschooling, with a bill specifically creating a 100% tax credit for donations to scholarship granting organizations, meaning that taxpayers will be fully reimbursed for their contributions, totally dwarfing the incentive for any other charity. And so you have many arguing that this will essentially funnel billions of taxpayer dollars to private schools, including to pay for the tuition of already wealthy families. And with that, you had the Washington Post reporting that households earning up to 3 times their area median income would qualify for the vouchers. Right, so in DC, for example, that means that families that make more than $450,000 would still be eligible. And then the final tax cut I want to hit on is the state and local tax deduction, also known as SALT, which allows taxpayers to write off the amount that they paid in local taxes when they file their federal tax bill. And there, under Trump's 2017 tax break, SALT deduction was capped at $10,000, but with this Republican bill, the cap goes up to $30,000, which actually is way less than the amount pushed for by Republican lawmakers in blue states and swing districts. In fact, it is such a big deal and such a big difference that it's been reported that the SALT deduction could imperil the fate of the entire package because of the House Republicans' slim majority, with us already seeing some Republican lawmakers saying they will not support the bill as is. Right, and so since this release, understandably, we've seen a lot of people talking about and debating the things that are in this bill. But there, I also think it's important to note one very significant measure that Republicans left out, and that is a tax hike on millionaires. Because you see, earlier this week, Trump flip-flopped on the idea, initially advising against it, but then saying that he'd be okay with it. But then, despite that, Republicans ultimately decided against increasing taxes on the ultra-wealthy to help finance Trump's sweeping agenda, focusing instead on making cuts to essential social safety net programs while taking other steps that will increase the cost of electricity, travel, and higher education. Because in addition to slashing Medicaid funds, the bill would also impose what has been described as the single biggest cut to food stamps in American history, with CAP reporting that Republicans have proposed cutting SNAP benefits by more than $290 billion, right, which would make it nearly 30% of the program's current funding, a cut that would dramatically impact the roughly 1 in 8 Americans who receive nutrition assistance through SNAP. And with this, the bill specifically would change eligibility requirements for older Americans, forcing able-bodied adults without dependents to work until they're 64 years old rather than 54 in order to qualify. And it would also shift more cost burdens to the states, which is a move that experts say could force some legislatures to have to make painful cuts to their budgets, which would likely create a spillover effect that could undermine public safety, education, and other important programs. Right? And then all of this is there are other proposals that Republicans have put forward to help pay for Trump's wish list that could end up hurting low-income and working-class Americans. With, for example, one of them being to eliminate a federal tax credit of up to $7,500 that households previously could receive for buying an electric vehicle. With Yassine Cap reporting that this move, alongside rollbacks in clean vehicle standards, will cause the families to spend hundreds more at the gas pump every year, a windfall of tens of billions of dollars in additional revenue for the oil companies over the next 10 years. With them then adding, in addition to ending financial support that made both new and used cars more affordable, the legislation would also impose an extra $250 annual fee on people who already own an EV and $100 for hybrid car owners. You then also have Republicans trying to cut federal investment for alternative energy sources, which is a move that could increase household electric bills. And there are also several provisions that could make college even more expensive. Because in total, Kat found that the GOP bill cuts around $350 billion for federal programs that help make higher education more accessible and affordable. With the bill, among other things, eliminating subsidized loans, which is a type of loan where the government covers interest while the student is still in school. It also introduces new loan or payment plans that increase payments for the lowest income borrowers, and it slashes eligibility for Pell Grants, which are allocated to the highest need students, including by forcing them to take more classes or lose funding, despite the fact that many may need to work part-time jobs to pay for college. And then beyond that, we see the proposal further targeting colleges by significantly raising taxes on private university endowments. And you have experts saying that is very notable because private schools are able to provide generous financial aid and scholarships through their endowment earnings, so slashing that would impact financial awards that they can give to students in need. But then also, despite these deep cuts, you have experts saying that the bill will still increase government deficits by trillions of dollars. And in fact, that is a concern that some Republicans have raised with, for example, one bipartisan committee finding that the extension of the 2017 tax breaks that would reduce revenue by $4.9 trillion over the next decade. And that number, it doesn't even include the new tax breaks. Or the fact that the bill also contains provisions that would distribute around $150 billion in new spending for the Defense Department and over $140 billion for Trump's border and immigration crackdown. With even Representative Chip Roy, a member of the conservative House Freedom Caucus, warning that the total price could hit $20 trillion and significantly add to America's deficits and debt. And so as a result, you have him, along with other Republicans, signaling that they would not support the one big beautiful bill as is. But as far as what happens next, that remains to be seen. One, we have to wait to see if the legislation can get passed within the time frame set by leadership, because you have House Speaker Mike Johnson saying he wants to get it through the House and Senate by Memorial Day, with the goal being to get it to Trump by July 4th. And there are actually some hard deadlines here, because the bill also raises the debt ceiling, which sets the amount of money that the government can borrow to pay its bills. And with that, you have the Treasury Secretary saying that lawmakers have until mid-July to increase the debt limit or risk a catastrophic default. And so the stage is set. We have big proposals that are going to drastically change things, probably impact pretty much everyone in the country, and a ticking clock. Fun times. And then I've got more news for you in just a minute, but first, remember when the scariest online threat was your mom picking up the landline during a download? Simpler times. Also, I'm aging myself with that reference. But now, scammers are so slick, they can probably trick your dog into handing over your credit card information. Because unfortunately, it feels like if you've got Wi-Fi and a pulse, congratulations, you're officially in a hacker's crosshairs. But it's also not just you, that sweet grandma who prints out emails, your kid who clicks everything, prime targets. And it's why you've got to use today's sponsor, NordVPN, your digital bodyguard in the chaos that's the modern internet. I've got the whole family on it. The kids love unlocking international Netflix. I use it to hide from targeted ads while Googling, is this rash normal? And NordVPN, it hides your IP like you're in digital witness protection. It encrypts your data with top-tier tech. Your ISP, block that shady guy in the coffee shop, block Big Brother, back off. And boom, you get access to thousands of servers across the globe, so you can be virtually anywhere while physically in your hoodie and sweats. So stay safe, stay private, stay binge watching that one show that's only on Canadian Netflix. Just scan that QR code or head to nordvpn.com/Phil or click the link in the description for a massive discount on a 2-year plan plus 4 bonus months. And it comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So that's nordvpn.com/Phil. But then next up today, in wild international news, we got to talk about the Philippines. Because an 80-year-old man was just elected mayor of the 3rd largest city in the country, despite being locked up more than 6,000 miles away. And that's all while his daughter, who's actually the country's vice president, she may have just won enough support to avoid impeachment and run for president in 2028. Because I'm talking about the current vice president, Sara Duterte, and her father, Rodrigo Duterte, who's the former president. And if you're unfamiliar, it's all messy, it's a bit hard to follow, so I'm gonna back up a minute and explain. You see, Rodrigo, his war on drugs, it left thousands dead, and is actually the reason he's detained in The Hague by the International Criminal Court. Right? And then the guy that replaced him, Ferdinand Bong Bong Marcos Jr., his father happened to be a dictator who tortured and killed his political opponents, as well as stole stole billions of dollars from the country before eventually being ousted in a largely peaceful uprising. But in any case, back in 2022, the younger Marcos ran with the younger Duterte as running mates, so then both winning landslide victories in separate elections and calling for national unity. Right? And this is them smiling and holding hands during the inauguration ceremony back in 2022. Right? But those smiles, they have not lasted. They have clashed over a number of policy issues since then, and this feud has only grown more bitter and more personal over time. With, for example, Duterte loudly and, let's say, colorfully criticizing Marcos, his wife, and the House Speaker, who is Marcos's cousin, accusing them of corruption, incompetence, and political persecution. With the ones telling reporters that her relationship with Marcos had gotten so toxic that she wanted to cut his head off. And then, not long after, I guess she was worried that maybe the message hadn't gotten put across, she said she would dig up his father's body and throw it in the sea. With this then seeing in February the president's allies in Congress voting to impeach Duterte over claims that she misused funds, as well as in connection to comments in which she seemingly threatened to have Marcos and members of his family assassinated. With then all of that setting the stage for a trial in the Senate where a 2/3 vote is needed for conviction. And if convicted, she'll be barred from public office, and that would kill her dream of replacing Marcos at the next presidential election in 2028. But, huge key thing, before that election, we had this midterm election. And of course, because of the looming impeachment trial, all eyes have been on the Senate. Especially because in the Philippines, senators are elected by a nationwide vote, and this time, 12 of 24 seats in the chamber were up for grabs. And notably, one of the ways Duterte decided to play this was by capitalizing on the Marcos government's decision to take her father into custody and send him to The Hague back in March, with her saying that he was kidnapped. With her messaging appearing to be effective because, according to the latest count, Marcos's allies appear to have captured fewer seats than expected. Because 6 of them went to candidates allied with the president, though notably, one of them also accepted an endorsement from Duterte. And that beyond that, 4 of the other winners are pretty firmly in Duterte's camp, and that notably includes Marcos's sister. At which point, I just gotta say, if you thought you had family drama, but then, moving on to Rodrigo's win for the mayorship of one of the country's major cities, that is yet another sign of just how popular the Dutertes are despite everything. Especially as this time, he reportedly won 8 times as many votes as his nearest rival, even though all voters got to see of him was a life-size cardboard cutout. Though notably, even though he's in prison, he had kind of a home field advantage. This is a position that he already served in for 22 years in 3 separate stretches before assuming the presidency. And this is since his daughter Sarah previously served twice, and his son has been in the position since 2022. There's actually been a Duterte in charge there for 34 out of the last 37 years. You know, one of the biggest things that we're seeing here is that an impeachment conviction is now looking at least a little bit less likely, and Duterte is already being seen as the front runner in the presidential election that's still several years away. And if she does end up winning, it's been reported that she will likely use the power of the office to seek vengeance against Marcos. But ultimately, I will say, even though so much just happened, and it's huge, we're gonna have to keep our eyes on this because it's honestly gonna take a long time before we ultimately see how this plays out. And there's just so many different things that could happen in the meantime. But then finally today, I'll leave you with more things that are happening and you might want to know about. The Cannes Film Festival just updated its dress code to ban nudity and dramatic gown trains, saying that they complicate seating and violate French decency laws. So this, as critics have called the move, an overreach, and also accused Cannes of focusing on the wrong issues given the festival's history of celebrating alleged abusers like Weinstein and Polanski. Beloved children's YouTube star Miss Rachel is facing attacks, with her even being labeled anti-Semite of the week by some after posting emotional pleas for compassion for children in Gaza, with Miss Rachel saying that her love for all kids knows no borders and slammed critics, saying it should be controversial to not say anything. Germany just arrested Peter Fitzek, the self-declared king of Germany, for running a far-right group accused of trying to create a state within a state, with them reportedly issuing their own IDs, refusing to pay taxes, and pushing anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. And ultimately, you have German officials saying that the Reichsbürger movement is now officially banned for trying to overthrow democracy. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who leads the left-wing Labour Party, just proposed major immigration restrictions. We're talking tougher English requirements, higher visa fees, and banning foreign healthcare workers. And in a tweet, he added that settlement in the UK is a privilege that is earned, not a right. Critics saying it's a swing to the right, and his use of the phrase island of strangers has drawn comparisons to Enoch Powell's infamous anti-immigration speech. A speech that was considered a black stain in British history, but also a new poll by YouGov shows that a slim majority of Britons actually agree with Starmer's sentiment. A new investigation found that hundreds of people in Illinois have been evicted under crime-free housing laws, even if they weren't convicted or even charged. And in some cases, it was for things like shoplifting or calling 911 too many times during mental health emergencies. One woman was evicted after her son made 100 calls in a year, and a statewide bill to curb this is now under review. And then lastly, after a lifetime of teaching art history at a small Florida college, Professor Chris Hassel left her $2.8 million estate to 36 people, with 31 of them being former students, and the gifts range from $26,000 to $560,000, with students calling her sharp, complicated and deeply loyal, and one saying it felt like it was her way of saying, here's something to help you be you. But that, my friends, is the end of your Tuesday evening, Wednesday morning dive into the news. Thank you for watching. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow, because of course I got a brand new show for you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Also, sorry, Dad, I hope you did not watch today's show.